Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 67 of ASP.NET Core tutorial. In this video, we will discuss two very important services provided by ASP.NET Core, UserManager and SignInManager. Let's understand the use of these two built-in services with an example. This is the same user registration page that we have been working with in our previous video in this series. At the moment, when we issue a post request by clicking this register button, notice we get 405 not found error. This is because at the moment, within our account controller, we do not have a register action method that can handle HTTP posts. So let's include another register action method. And decorate this version with HTTP post. Instead of HTTP GET. This method receives register view model. This method receives register view model as an input parameter. Let's call the parameter model. And bring in employee management dot view model namespace. It is already there. Now what do we want to do? When we click this register button, we want to create a new user using the information provided in the underlying SQL Server database. For that, we are going to use the built-in user manager services provided by ASP.NET Core. Notice it accepts a generic parameter. We use this generic parameter to specify the user class that we want this user manager service to work with. At the moment, we are using the built-in identity user class as the argument for the generic parameter. The generic parameter is an extension point. So this means we can create our own custom user class with any additional data that we want to capture about the user, and then plug in that custom class as an argument for the generic parameter instead of the built-in identity user class. We will discuss how to do that in our upcoming videos. For now, let's just use this built-in identity user class. As the name implies, we use this user manager service to manage users of our application. This class contains methods like CreateAsync, DeleteAsync, UpdateAsync, etc. As the name implies, we use these methods to create, delete, and update users respectively. To be able to use this user manager service, we need to inject it into our account controller. Back in our account controller, let's include a constructor. And we want to inject user manager of identity user. user manager of identity user. Let's bring in the required namespace. Namespace is already there, and let's call the parameter user manager. In addition to user manager, we also need SignInManager. As the name implies, we use this service to manage user sign-in, and this class contains method like SignInAsync, SignOutAsync, is signed in, etc. Notice, just like user manager, SignInManager also accepts a generic parameter. So we could specify the type of user class that we want this service to work with. So in addition to user manager, let's also inject SignInManager. Let's call the parameter SignInManager. Let's call the parameter SignInManager. Next, let's ask Visual Studio to generate the required private field for both these services by pressing Control period. Put the cursor at user manager first and Control public, and create an assigned field. This is the option. Double click at it, and then same as, and then for SignInManager, put the cursor at SignInManager, Control public, create an assigned field. The first thing that we want to do in this register action method is check if this incoming model object is valid. So if model state dot is valid, if the incoming model object is valid, then we want to write code here to create the new user. If it is not, then we want to re-render the register view and display any validation errors we might have. For that, let's pass the model object to the view. If the model state is valid, let's create a new identity user object. Let's create a new identity user object, and then we want to copy the data that we have in this incoming model object, into the identity user object. Now if we take a look at our register view, what data are we capturing? We are capturing user's email and password. We are going to use user's email as their username. So username equals So username equals model dot email, and email is also equal to model dot email. If you are wondering why are we copying the data from this incoming model, object into the identity user object. Well, that is because the built-in user manager user manager service works with identity user object. Now for us to be able to create the new user, we are going to make use of this CreateAsync method. So on the injected user manager service, let's use CreateAsync method. Notice there are two overloaded versions. We are going to use the second overloaded version, where we can also pass the password. So the first parameter is the instance of identity user object. Instance of identity user object. And the second parameter is the user password. And where do we get the password from? It is present on the password property of our incoming model object. The password is then hashed and securely stored in the underlying database table. We will look at that in action in just a bit. As the name implies, this CreateAsync method is an asynchronous method, so we should await it, and let's store the result that we get back in a variable called result. Await await. And since we are using await keyword, we need to turn this register method into async method. For that, let's use async keyword and then wrap the result that are getting back, in this case I action result, using a task. Using a task. If you are new to the concept of async method, then please check out this part 101 from our C# tutorial for beginner course. On this result object, that we are getting back, which is of type identity result, As you can see from the IntelliSense, we have a Boolean property called succeeded. We can use that property to check if the user is created successfully. What do we want to do after the user is successfully created? Well, let's use this. Let's use this built-in sign-in manager. Built-in sign-in manager SignInAsync method and sign the user in Notice on the injected sign-in manager, service instance, we have SignInAsync method. We have SignInAsync method, and this method takes two parameters. The first parameter is the identity. The first parameter is the identity user object instance. We have that in the user variable. So let's pass that as the first parameter. The second parameter is a Boolean. The second parameter is a Boolean parameter. We use this parameter to specify if we want to create a session cookie or a permanent cookie. A session cookie is immediately lost after we close a browser window, whereas a permanent cookie retained on the client machine even after the browser window is closed. In our case, we want to create a session cookie, so let's set is persistent Boolean parameter to false. So let's set is persistent Boolean parameter to false. As the name implies, this method, this method also is async method. So let's use the await. So let's use the await keyword and then redirect the user to index action of our home controller. And then redirect the user to index action of our home controller on this result object, that we are getting back. We also have errors collection property. If the succeeded property has returned false, that means we are not successful in creating a user. If we are not successful, we want to loop through each error. We won't loop through. We want to loop through each error that we have in the errors collection. That we have in the error collection. As we are looping through each error, let's add it to the model state object. As we are looping through each error, let's add it to the model state object. For that, on the model state object, we have add model errors. We have add model error. As a key, I am going to pass in an empty string. As a key, I am going to pass in an empty string, and to get the error message itself on the error loop variable, we have description. These validations errors are then displayed. In our register view, by this validation summary tag helper. With all these changes in place, let's run our projects. But let me tell you something here. If you get green line squiggly here, if you get green line squiggly below this model.password, that is coming from nullable reference type in C#. Let me break it down step by step. Why the warning appears? In our register view model.cs file, suppose I use this operator and then go back to account controller. So you can see, using that question mark operator, we get this green squiggly. Why this green is coming from? Why this green squiggly appear? It is a warning under model.password in our account controller.cs file is coming from nullable reference type in C#. Let me break it down step by step. In our register view model.cs file, the question mark operator means this property is nullable. But when you call variable result await UserManager.CreateAsync method user model password, the compiler warns us because model.password might be null, and CreateAsync method accepts a non-null string for the password. So squiggly is not an error, but a nullability warning. How to fix? Just remove this question mark operator and put this string.empty. Since a password should never be null, declare it as non-nullable. This ensures password is always initialized and avoids the warning. Warnings. So Now run the project with all these changes in place. Let's run our project. Save everything. And build the solution once again. Build started. We need to close this. Build succeeded. And now run the project. Notice when I try to register a new user without providing any data, we see the required validation. As expected. Now let's provide a valid email address, and then I am going to use a very simple password ABC. And let's click register button. Notice we have validation errors related to the password complexity. Password must be at least 10 characters. It must have at least one non-alphanumeric characters, at least one digit, and at least one uppercase. We did not configure these rules. Where are these rules coming from and how to customize these? We will answer these questions in our next video. For now, let's provide a password that meets all these complexity rules. So provide a valid password. And then let's click the register button. Notice the user is registered and we are redirected to the list view where we see the list of employees. Now if we take a look at SQL Server Object Explorer, now if we look at Now, if we take a look at SQL Server Object Explorer and then the data that we have in this ASP net user database table, so view the data. Notice the username is Surinder@surinder.com. Email is also the same, and look at the password. The password is not stored in plain text. The password is not stored in plain text. It is hashed and then securely stored here. So even if someone gets unauthorized access to this database table, they would not know what the actual password is. In our next video, we will discuss default password complexity rules provided by ASP.NET Core and how to customize them. to meet our application's specific requirements. That's it in this video. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.